you worry about a thing. Jesus Christ is still the King.
Welcome to The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr on Iowa Catholic Radio. Every Wednesday, diving deep in the truth of the Catholic Church and restoring all things in Christ. The Uncommon Good, live from the Mercy Live Up studio.
The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner.
I'm Dr. Bud Marr.
And we are coming to you from the Mercy Live Up studios on the Iowa Catholic Radio on a beautiful Ash Wednesday / St. Valentine's Day. Bud, how are you doing out there in Pittsburgh?
I'm doing okay. We actually hosted John Leonetti at the Institute for Newman Studies. So he broadcast his morning show here in Pittsburgh on Monday morning. It was like fusing two of my favorite worlds.
Was it especially erudite for a John Leonetti show?
Well, it was kind of dicey because it snowed that morning.
Oh, yeah.
And Pittsburgh traffic is bad generally, but he needed to leave himself another hour. So John came kind of like stumbling into the center 2 minutes before his show started. But it was amazing to watch him wire up.
Yeah, I'm looking at Jeb and Tony, and they're like, so what was different? No, I was kidding. So, yeah, he was. Oh, yeah. Tony said, he made it early for you guys.
The Institute still smells like. Does he wear that Pope Pius IX cologne?
I hope so. So I was going to ask you, speaking of fragrances and usages and things like this. So we had Ash Wednesday Mass this morning at Mercy, and so I got my Ashen Cross. Do you guys use French fries for ashes in Pittsburgh?
They just they overcook them and then crumble them all up, and it makes a beautiful ash. No, my family's doing a 7 p.m. Mass tonight. Rachel's singing in the choir, so I look like a heathen, I guess, with no ashes on my
That's right. Everyone's looking at you thinking you've probably just ate a hamburger, don't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, go ahead.
We can get into this later, but I know that there's a lot of discussion with Ash Wednesday falling on St. Valentine's Day this year, and does this give a dispensation to spouses for giving those Valentine's Day gifts?
I kept telling people that at this point you can give your wife dead flowers and like you're just strangely being poetic and covering both bases.
There you go. I'm holding you to that. Okay, that works.
Yeah, that's official. Book it.
Book it.
So if you needed to make it official, Bud, you know how you could make it official? By printing it off on paper using ink from Cartridge World that underwrites our show.
Yeah, I'm sure Cartridge World loves this time of year because, the Valentine's cards are out in full force. Remember as a kid with the little boxes and you'd pass through and put one in each kid's box, and then as a boy you would decipher that girl you had the crush on. You'd try to read between the lines of her Peanuts Valentine's card or whatever.
Yeah, depending on which character. If you got Linus, she was not interested.
Not interested.
Yeah. 801 73rd Street, Windsor Heights. Business customers, there's discounts. They care about the environment. A wonderful way to do your printing. Also, as always, brought to you by Mercy College of Health Sciences. Bud, we had the bishop in. He gave his faith and healing talk. It was pretty fantastic. Over 50 people braved the possible winter snowmageddon to make it out to hear Bishop. And, it went great.
Yeah, you're lucky that Mercy College is in Des Moines, Iowa, and not North Carolina, because, the weatherman mentioned snow, and everyone just huddles in the basement for 3 days. So I'm glad you still got 50 out. And I went around you to see, I'm going to ask some people, not Bo, how it went. And I heard some rave reviews. So that's great.
I'm glad that on the show you're establishing that I'm untrustworthy for reportings of events.
I just wanted, a second opinion.
I understand. Well, but so we do have one more Faith and Healing coming up. That's going to be actually in April with our buddy who's been on the show, William English, out from he's a professor out at Georgetown. But yeah, we are in the middle of everything, Buzz. So the middle of the semester, the middle of Lent. These are the days of grinding and gnashing of teeth for many students, but precisely because they're doing the hard work so that especially come this summer, many of them are going to walk across the stage in April. They're going to pass their NCLEX, and then they will be officially healthcare providers out in the community. So if you're interested in finding your vocation and doing something, if you feel called to help people in the healing, this is a great way to do it, mchs.edu. So, Bud, for today, we are going to talk about this great conflagration between Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day. I have not been Catholic enough for it to ever have happened to me before, so it would be interesting to see if there's other Catholics who have experienced this already. Have you seen how often this happens?
No, I haven't looked into that, but I know that the way that the holidays fell this year, it's got a lot of people talking, because I've had students and friends at church say, oh, it's kind of interesting that Ash Wednesday falls on Valentine's Day, and I guess culturally we feel like those things are kind of divided, Valentine's Day is sweet and nice, and you should go out and have a great dinner, and Ash Wednesday is a day to kind of be somber, and it's more reflective, but we've got some ideas this morning about tackling these topics together.
Yeah, actually, and just an easy one is I think sometimes you feel better about yourself after Ash Wednesday because you're like, oh, I made it all day barely eating. And I think there's a lot of people who've had Valentine's Day who strictly on the eating thing usually are like, oh my gosh, how did I do that to myself? I should not have ate that much chocolate. You didn't pre-celebrate Valentine's Day, it doesn't sound like.
No, well, for the sake of full disclosure, Rachel and I, and people don't always believe me on this one, but we're not big, special day people, if that makes sense.
Right.
So we try to maintain, a good, steady marriage. But, we don't,
Good.
My dad will be like, oh, Bud, what did you get Rachel for her birthday? And I'll say,
a high five.
A bag of, she likes Starburst. And he's really disappointed, but we're not, she and I are not super bummed out that, we don't have the chance to go out for, a Valentine's Day. For one thing, up to 5 kids now, that's tough to pull off anyway.
Yeah. Well, friends, if you're riveted by all of this, stick around, because after this break, we will be back with more on the Uncommon Good. Here on The Uncommon Good, we want to make sure that if you are wanting to, you can interact with the show. So please just text in on our text line, 515-223-1150. That's 515-223-1150. Call us on iowacatholicradio.com, 1150 AM, 88.5 FM, 94.5 FM. Streaming live on Iowa Catholic Radio app through Blessman Ministries and the People's Abstract Company. So you can listen to us all those different ways. But if you want to interact with the show, 515-223-1150. As you heard earlier, we'd love to hear if anybody else, we're not going to say one of you older Catholics, but one of you more anciently wise Catholics who has lived through the conflagrations of these days. We'd love to hear from you, but we'd also love to read any of your texts about ideas you have about how you're going to celebrate both of these together. 515-223-1150. Stick around. We'll be back with the Uncommon Good.
Thank you, Construction Professionals, for your support of Dowling Catholic Sports 365. Construction Professionals is a family-owned business dedicated to our customers. Whether designing, building, or renovating,
Thank you, Caldwell Parish, for underwriting Iowa Catholic Radio. Conform to the wishes of the deceased and to Catholic liturgical burial traditions. Caldwell Parish Funeral Home, Des Moines' only Catholic-owned and operated funeral home. CaldwellParish.com. Hey friends, John Leonetti here, and I want to thank Plaza Dental Group for underwriting my show. Plaza Dental Group makes their patients feel comfortable and right at home, like one of the family. Catholic-owned, they offer cosmetic dentistry and implants, 6-month smiles, and Invisalign, an alternative to traditional braces, along with mercury-free dentistry. Plaza Dental Group, comfortable dentistry. 515-344-3523. Online at dmsmiles.com.
Support for the Uncommon Good is provided by Cartridge World. Cartridge World is an industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print great.
Perfect for businesses, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies including ink, toner, paper, or printers. For business customers, pickup and delivery are available. Products are guaranteed or full replacement.
Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, and online at cartridgeworld.com.
Support for Dowling Catholic Sports is provided by Two Rivers Glass and Door, providing commercial glass and aluminum storefronts. 515-222-4860. Joe at tworiversglass.com.
Did you know that Center for Life Counseling at Catholic Charities offers professional therapy that can benefit your overall health and wellness and help you to manage daily struggles in a more positive way? Learn more at CatholicCharitiesDM.org.
Back with the Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr, coming to you on Ash Wednesday / Valentine's Day. What did we say? Not a mashup. What did we do with the Man Up guys?
Yeah, how'd that go? Crossover,
yeah.
So
Valentine's Day,
crossover.
Ash Wednesday crossover. Yeah. So, folks, Bud and I have a confession to make because it's Lent, so confessions are in order. We were supposed to have people come into the show today, and they stood us up. And we're not going to say who it is, but let's just say that it sounds like Saddam, Tory, and Juan Jin, and that they maybe work for a diocese, and that diocese might be around somewhere where the show takes place. I'll leave that up to your imagination, who that might be, right?
Well, it's funny how it all worked out because we've been part of a Bible study, and the group of guys that meet up, they have this text thread, and Juan Jan and Saddam Gori were saying, like, oh, yeah, we'll be on the show. And then their supervisor, who's also part of the Bible study, was like, guys,
we have a meeting?
I'm expecting you at a meeting tomorrow.
And you have to talk nice about the meeting now. Well, but I actually think that this is you and I are used to this because I don't know about you. Valentine's Day, there's quite a bit of striking out for old Bo in the high school days on Valentine's Day.
No, I'm with you there. So it can be some PTSD on this day.
So us being lonely, it's like we're sitting in the bleachers at the Valentine's Day dance, Bud. So it's just like old times.
Yeah, so Ash Wednesday works well, but we were talking before the show. You know, it's interesting historically that St. Valentine's Day has become associated with love and romance. If you think of St. Valentine, you know, one of the more impressive martyrs. Martyrdom's always impressive, but you think about the way that he died and the nature of his witness, and yet this has been turned into, in our culture, you know, sort of like the culmination of our understanding of romance and love. And you, Bo, you were telling me this was grounded in medieval history?
Yeah, and it's actually quite accidental. So it's actually my boy Chaucer. I'm claiming him as mine. Most people know him, of course, for the Canterbury Tales. And in that one, this kind of shows you what I'm going to get at. The Canterbury Tales sort of starts because people want to go on a pilgrimage to Thomas the Martyr or St. Thomas Becket. And then it's just this whole sort of premise for these stories that they tell. Well, he wrote another work called The Parliament of Fowls, and it's sort of this like dreamy, allegory type fun work where a bunch of birds get together on St. Valentine's Day. So early spring, he calls it. I mean, I look outside right now where I'm at, and I don't think it looks at spring, but who knows what global warming was like back when Chaucer was there. But the idea is that the birds get together on St. Valentine's Day because they need to have a discussion about who their mate will be for the rest of the year. And funny enough, by the end of it, they don't make any decisions. They just pledge to fly off and come back the next year, and maybe they'll make a better decision. But the idea was that, you know, this sort of pre-spring, the birds would get together on St. Valentine's Day and discuss who their mate was going to be. And like I said, maybe Chaucer, maybe he was representing a tradition that already existed, but he also might have just been, St. Valentine's Day, sure. But after that, people were like, yeah, St. Valentine's Day, that's a perfect day to start talking about who you're going to pair off with. And so then it started leaking into, winter's about over, the sun's going to come out. Who are you going to drink cider with and do your medieval, dances with? Why not on St. Valentine's Day? So it's funny that it kind of got started because randomly every day of the year in the Middle Ages was, some sort of feast of a saint or some sort of memorial. Yeah. And so when you said like, oh, in spring, and someone goes, when in spring? You're like, St. Valentine's Day. And then it kind of stuck. And so everybody's like, yeah, St. Valentine, patron of lovers, and you're like, oh, the guy who had his head chopped off brutally, and then you're like, oh, well, maybe there's more wisdom to that than you realize.
Well, I think it's fitting that these two days coalesce this year. You think about in our culture, romance has become sort of the primary means of self-fulfillment, where people are like, well, if I haven't found my soulmate, then I'm unfulfilled. And what's fascinating about Christianity is in some ways Christianity ups the ante on romance because, St. Paul says that the relationship between husband and wife is actually a sign of Christ, and we witness to the world through this. And yet, for Christians, it's grounded in something completely different. And so, it's not that Christian marriage is a perpetual downer. If my wife is listening,
yeah, right.
But we are called to die to self. So when you look in that passage in Ephesians, St. Paul challenges husbands, love your Christ as Christ loved the church. And so even that cruciform witness that imbues all of the Catholic life, you see it particularly in marriage. We have to die to self to love our spouse. And then also, even the sacrifice to have children, in a certain sense, I feel like the way that the culture at large thinks about marriage is it's kind of this desire for perpetual youth.
Right.
Like you turn on the television, and the kind of relationships that we uphold and that we glorify, it's always like the young and the beautiful. Marriage for Christians, it's an aid to holiness, like we're called to help our spouse reach heaven, but it's also a recognition that we're mortal, and that part of the work that God's given us is to train up the next generation who, let's be honest, folks, they're going to replace us, right?
That's right.
And so, but there's something beautiful and challenging and glorious about that calling as well.
No, that's a good point. Is basically family life is a long reminder that I will one day be ash again. that I'm returning to dust as we speak. I'm turning to dust live, bud, and there are 5 souls in the house noticing it. And with my wife, at the end of the day, it's mostly us just talking about the various ways our bodies are returning to ash. So we went sledding over the weekend, and my kids had a great time, and I had okay time until I actually sat back down in the car, and then immediately my body was like, guess what you shouldn't have done?
Yeah.
And so I woke up, and one of my feet was mysteriously swollen, and I think it's just a matter of I think one of the times I wrecked with the girls, I put my foot out or something like that. And so on Ash Wednesday, you get the ashen cross on your head to say, hey, buddy, you're returning to dust. But growing old with your wife in many ways is like you reminding each other of this every day. What hurts? What's returning to dust as we speak? And I think you're right. You look at kids, and I don't want to say it's just frustration that reminds you of this, like you're grinding your teeth into dust because they're not picking up their room or whatever. But even like you said, the sort of bitter sweetness of even mile markers they're hitting. It's really cool that my son, recently turned 11. And that he's doing this, that, or the other. But, unless you're careful, your mind immediately is going to start wandering into, next, in a flash of an eye, I'm going to be, 85, and they're going to have to, take me to the bathroom and stuff. And so, I think you're right. Family life in many ways is this sounds really terrible, but it is a reminder that you came from dust, and to dust you shall return. So I understand why people, if they're afraid to be reminded of that, they're going to be afraid to actually start families.
No, and I think Pope Benedict, when he was reigning as Pope, that he actually brought this up, that in Europe, the pattern that you saw of people waiting to get married or not married at all is kind of a denial of their own mortality. But since being Catholic, I don't know, I've talked about on the show before, the Catholic religion is the idea of the both and. Mm-hmm. And whenever we celebrate days like this, I'm always reminded, so on one level you could go to an Ash Wednesday Mass and have it be this really moving individual experience, you reflect on your own mortality.
Right.
And I'm always struck by the communal nature of the liturgy on a day like this one where, in Scripture, is it Jesus or St. Paul? I think it's Paul. He says it might be our Lord. When a wealthy guest comes into your house, don't give them the chair of privilege. Or when you go to a party, take the least chair, and then if the host comes up and says come sit at my right hand, you'll be exalted instead of humbled, et cetera, et cetera. Well, at the Mass, at a day like Ash Wednesday, what other community on earth has everyone, regardless of social position or age, come up and receive ashes and be reminded, from dust you have been created, to dust you shall return? It's really a powerful sense of before God, we all stand sinful and in need of His grace, and without that, we don't have life in us.
Yeah, actually, I think this is a good way to head off one of the complaints I hear the most from non-Catholics or even non-Christians, they'll say, oh, the very reading of the Mass this day says that, you should do these things in private, and when you fast, you shouldn't, moan about or look disheveled. You should put, oil on your face, and like what you do in secret, your Father will know in secret. And so they go, well, then what's with the ashes on your head? And you're like, okay, buddy. I'm assuming it's a buddy. Listen, buddy. When this came about, everyone in town was Catholic or Christian, right? I mean, like where these practices come about. So no one is trying to up someone else with ash displays. What it does show, though, is like you said. So the king and the village idiot both have ashes. So it's actually going back to what we say. It's like you said, the common fate of us all. So it's a little bit different. It's not saying look how awesome my fasting is. It's to say, you and I are alike. We both will be worm food. None of us has some sort of special claim on the afterlife just because of who we are. So in this life, it might be that I happen to have, fortune and fame or whatnot. But when it all comes down to it, you and I are both going to the common destination, so both of us need to be serious about what's coming up for Lent. So I think that that's a great point, and that I understand why people can misunderstand it if it seems like we're sort of showing ourselves to be different. But the idea is less. I'm supposed to see everybody else's less than showing off my ashes.
That's right. To not receive ashes at the liturgy, you'd almost, in a sense, be setting yourself apart. And yet,
not me. In
a
I'm going to be fine. I'm going to make it. Yeah.
But I mean, what Christ said there, the heart of it, you don't want to go around on Ash Wednesday and be like, I think I'm going to faint because my fasting is so rigorous.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because I don't know these people who really. I mean, I've seen that there's people who have started fasting more regularly as part of a diet where people really are trying to fast more, and that sounds so unpleasant. But it's one of the deal where you tempt yourself to think I would be a great person if given the possibility, and I'm like, I totally could fast more, and I have not been interested in even trying. The church has to tell me to fast. So if any of you out there go oh, Bo thinks he's great because he's on the radio, not true, because unless the Holy Mother Church is like, Bo, stop eating, I have problems doing it.
Well, it's funny in modern day America what we'll sacrifice for, what we'll make. We'll go to great lengths to get in shape or to look a certain way. And here, Holy Mother Church asks us to fast for the sake of our spiritual good. And St. Paul says at one point, to buffet your body for physical ends, there's merit in that. And I could probably hear that word a little more strongly this year. But
he
said, to do penance for the sake of heaven, how much greater is that? And I think this is one area I've been struck this year, Bo, where the Old Testament resonates to all this. As you go through the Old Testament, so many instances where society was out of whack or where a king had done a great sin. And in the Old Testament, the people of God, they would sit in ashes,
right,
which is pretty intense, and they'd put on sackcloth. If you really want to lean into it this year, go out and buy some sackcloth at your local Target.
You got to be careful, though, bud, because we'll start saying that, and then sackcloth will actually raise in price because it'll be cool. It's like, get your $100 pair of ripped sackcloth,
It's like Cardinal Burke endorsed sackcloth or something.
Well, I was thinking more unfortunately, Zoolander. What's the garbage one? But at any rate, no one needs to go look that up and do research. Just trust me that it's dumb.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that sort of idea, I think you're right. Someone asked me this morning on the radio show, "Oh, Bo, are you hangry at this point?" And I said I was born hangry. Came out of the womb crying, asking for food. I was joking, but there's a way that's goes back to this theme is the dependence that we start to feel very important for us who live in a very readily, accommodating a society is. Never to be impressed by your own fast, but if you do actually feel hungry today, think about the radical dependence on food that you actually have. And even though it's pretty much available 24 hours at the drop of a hat if you have money, It's not just a matter of what if you were poor or, what if you didn't have those resources. All true and all good things to think about. But again, think about how, fragile the food line is. What happens if the food trucks don't show up to your town tomorrow? You are radically dependent on others in a way that is simply undeniable if you take the time to think of it. But you can walk through life and never think about it. And so how the Holy Mother Church says, you know what? Just be a bit hungry today, even you, who can eat whenever you want, and start to realize how much it is that we depend on the earth, other people, the cycle of the seasons, etc., just to be able to eat.
Well, Bo, some students used to ask me, and I wondered if you had any theories on this, in some ways Ash Wednesday is a tough message to hear, to be reminded of your mortality. And I feel like there's a lot of elements in our culture that exist to have us not think about our own deaths. We're a very loud culture. Even good things like sporting events or whatever, they can be a way to sort of like tune out and forget that you are dust and that one day you'll return to the grave. And yet, oddly enough, Ash Wednesday, not a holy day of obligation. In my experience, it's one of the most widely attended liturgies in the church year.
Oh, yeah.
It might be, like at Mercy College, I think we had more students on Ash Wednesday than for almost any other Mass. Why do you think and this resonates with modern people?
Yeah, I have several theories that I've thrown out through the years, but, part of it might be simple things. You get to walk away with something. Mm-hmm. And you're like, you have ashes on your head, and you're like, oh, so it's like, it's a good deal. You're like, yeah. It's free, ashes for free, which is just hilarious to think about.
Like palms on Palm Sunday.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, cool, free palms. What do you need them for? I don't know, they're free. But I actually think it's deeper than that. I do think people, deep down, as it were, want to be reminded of human things. And, in a world that is very virtual, not just like that we interact on screens and things like this, but that a lot of our relationships are mediated through a lot of, virtual barriers, as it were, or filters by which we see the world. It doesn't get more real than someone telling you you're going to die and then putting, the sign of what it will be like. You won't be any different than this burnt ash. I think people deep down want to hear that. They want to be reminded, and it's sort of like if you're floating in space and your muscles start to atrophy, that first time where there's actually gravity and you can walk and feel the ground. I think Ash Wednesday provides that for people. I don't know if they would ever say that themselves, but otherwise I don't know how to account for the appeal, like you said, for a non-obligation day, especially when we don't see people all that regularly.
I remember talking in our bioethics course with students about death. Yeah, Bo and I were real cheery professors. But it was kind of surprising to some of the students. We told them that even a half century ago, if someone died in a town, the entire town might shut down. But certainly with your relatives, you would attend your uncle's funeral. There's no question about it, right?
Right.
And yet many, you can meet a lot of 25-year-olds today that have never been in the presence of someone who's dying. And so I do think culturally, medically, we found ways to sort of push death to margins. And yet you see this real fascination with zombie films, vampire shows, right? And it's like that kind of fascination with death has migrated to entertainment. And I think this is a chance for the church to be evangelistic in the best sense of the term, that, as people have these questions about their own mortality, about what is my life about, Ash Wednesday speaks to a lot of the questions and the yearnings that I think humans have.
No, I think that that's exactly right. To see people transfer something deep down they know is something that they have to face. And this, not to get too psychological about it, but I think that starts to be what happens is people make it into something sort of flippant or, like you said, just entertainment so they can keep it at arm's length. But deep down, when you put ashes on someone's head, that's not like watching a zombie movie. That's sort of internalizing it for yourself. Well, when we get back from the break, Bud, we can go further into this, talk about zombies, Valentines, hearts, pink and red things. It all goes together. This is The Uncommon Good. Stick around. We'll be back after this break. Friends, there's all sorts of ways that you can interact with us. You can go to Facebook, Iowa Catholic Radio, on Twitter, at IA Catholic Radio. We would love to hear you berate us about our what we think is good Valentine's Day ideas through social media. Like I said, you can text us 515-223-1150 and talk to us on the show. Also, you can interact with us through events going on throughout the diocese. For instance, we have the Iowa Catholics Men's Conference coming up, Faith for the Journey. We're going to have Dr. Alan Hunt and Trent Horn from Catholic Answers, also some dude named Bo Bonner hosting it. There's all sorts of things if you want to go and look on iowacatholicradio.com. We would love to have you out there. We would love you to get involved with the different events, the Catholic Culture Series, for instance, Katie Patrizio. But like I said, you can find all that at Iowa Catholic Radio on Facebook and at IA Catholic Radio on Twitter. Stick around. We'll be back with the Uncommon Good.
Thank you, Caldwell Parish, for underwriting Iowa Catholic Radio. Conform to the wishes of the deceased and to Catholic liturgical burial traditions. Caldwell Parish Funeral Home, Des Moines' only Catholic-owned and operated funeral home. CaldwellParish.com.
Thank you, Construction Professionals, for your support of Dowling Catholic Sports 365. Construction Professionals is a family-owned business dedicated to our customers. Whether designing, building, or renovating, we are here to better serve you. CPCustomHomes.com.
Are you Catholic or culture? Why not both? The Diocese of Des Moines is proud to present the Catholic Culture Lecture Series. Join us on the fourth Saturday of every month to learn more about the Catholic Church and how it applies to your life here in Des Moines. The upcoming lecture is on February 24th at St. Augustine's Parish Hall, featuring Katie Patrizio on modern intellectualism and Christianity. A social refreshments are at 7 p.m., the lecture at 7:30, and a Q&A at 8:30. All lectures are free and open to the public. For more information, call John Wynn at 515-237-5006.
Support for the Uncommon Good is provided by Cartridge World. Cartridge World is an industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print great.
Perfect for businesses, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies including ink, toner, paper, or printers. For business customers, pickup and delivery are available. Products are guaranteed or full replacement.
Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, and online at cartridgeworld.com.
Thank you to Me & Sons for your support of Dowling Catholic High School basketball, an Italian family restaurant with old country authentic Italian food. Enjoy the local atmosphere while you may even spot a priest. To Me & Sons is located at Southeast 1st Street, just south of downtown Des Moines. ToMeAndSons.net.
Last year, 150, or 150 students gained essential employment skills and graduated from computer classes through Catholic Charities Hispanic Community Outreach. With your help, we are making a difference, but the need continues. Learn more at CatholicCharitiesDM.org.
Back with the Uncommon Good, Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr talking to you about Ash Wednesday, St. Valentine's Day, Mashup, and how we can we can learn various things by considering them together. So we talked a lot about fasting and ashes, the first part of the show. I actually think something else that's held in common between Valentine's Day and Ash Wednesday is berefting yourself of money, bud. You can either give alms to someone who needs it, or you can buy overly expensive chocolates and flowers for someone that you have a crush on. So, I don't know. Actually, you would think that the alms actually probably go to more good, and don't get me started on how ridiculous it is how much flowers cost.
Yeah, this is certainly an instance where the gift shops know that there's a little pressure to buy certain gifts. And so the supply and demand principle is fully at work.
Yeah, Robin was trying to tell me, like, what flowers she likes that are not all that expensive. And you know that meme where Homer starts dreaming of like a circus bear balancing on a ball every time she starts explaining flowers. And I like nature, but it starts becoming, circus music in my head, and I don't remember.
This is the cheap Midwestern in me, but on the drive into work today, I was actually thinking to myself, is there some way as like committed Catholics that we can scheme to move all of the secular holidays like one day back so that we get everything at a discount?
That's right. Just the day after.
If we moved Valentine's Day to one day after the secular celebration of it, we could buy our wives roses at a huge discount.
And they're barely wilting at that point, right?
That's right.
I mean, in many ways, like, we're asking for alms, right? Attention from our wives, like, just give us a little bit of attention, wife. Like we have, the clanking, coffee can. Just actually pay attention to us instead of the kids. This is all, we're really making this sound as desperate as possible.
Well, Bo, we've already talked about fasting. I've heard from different preachers that are priests that fasting, almsgiving, and prayer are sort of like the 3 Lenten disciplines. Is that sort of a small T tradition, or does that go? I don't know. Is that like official teaching by the church, or is that sort of like a pious tradition?
Well, I think this starts to be where we don't have to like really separate it. That I know it's in the Catechism. They say this has been tradition since time immemorial. I don't think it's tradition to say that like you must do these 3 things like a checklist, but certainly that's what people have been understanding, Lent to be this entire time is in some way we're going to pray more, focus our prayers. In some ways we're going to give to the poor, and in some ways we're going to fast. We're going to give up something. For instance, Deacon Tony, I think he said he gave up buying flowers for Lent, so his wife's just going to have to deal. No, okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm going to adopt that fasting principle as well. So fasting, prayer, obviously, and great prayers, not like personal ones. The one that I always think of is Stations of the Cross. But almsgiving, it's not just sort of giving to the poor in a sort of way of like offloading money or getting a sort of tax rebate sort of idea. The idea is, can we offer parts of ourselves to the Lord? So we offer ourselves to the Lord through prayer. We offer ourselves to the Lord by imitating Him in the desert with His 40 days of fasting. We offer ourselves by clearing away aspects of things that we like and giving them over to the Lord. But we also can offer to the Lord our resources through the hands of the poor. Gary Anderson has a great book called Sin, A History. It's one of the best books that I could ever recommend to you. But he really points out that there's not only a tradition of this in late antique Judaism into Christianity, but he really points out that there are certain people, Saint Ephraim the Syrian comes to mind, that will say things as boldly as there are 2 altars that you can give your gifts to the Lord. One is the altar of the sacrifice and the Mass, and the other is the hands of the poor. And, that's a really powerful way to say that when we give of our plenty to those who need it, we're not just giving it to them, although that, of course, is great, but we're also giving to the Lord Himself.
Yeah, I'm really admire Gary Anderson's book as well, Sin, A History. And after reading that book, Bo, I was struck. Anderson really demonstrates how so much of the Scriptures are permeated with economic language. And now that he's pointed that out to me, it stands out in relief, and I'm kind of surprised I didn't see it before. Even in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. But throughout the New Testament, Jesus uses so many parables that have this kind of economic structure to them. And it goes all the way back to the Old Covenant. You have something like in the book of Proverbs that he who is generous to the downtrodden makes a loan to the Lord. He will repay him his due. And I think this is one area about where maybe as Christians we've been not literal enough.
Right.
Anderson makes the point, our Lord says at one point, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. And he says the Lord will return 100-fold. And so Anderson has this great line in the book, and this has really stuck with me, that, to save our money at interest, that has a short-term value. Like we can save up for retirement, and there's something to be said for that. But to use our money for the work of God, whatever we pour into that, we can't even imagine the return that God will give. Some of the early Christian writers describe the hands of the poor as like another altar.
Right.
And so to lay it on to sacrifice our money in that way, you've already mentioned radical dependency. Like we so often live with this mistaken idea, like I'm a self-created person. We're radically dependent, and so when someone turns to us in need, we are encountering Christ. And to give, in a sense, I'm saying to myself, like, God, I know that that I couldn't have what I have unless you had gifted it to me, and so I return this to you, knowing that the return will be, more than I could imagine.
What I like to think of is, and I think this is Alexander Schmemann, who's an Eastern Orthodox theologian, but I'm plagiarizing this from someone, I just don't remember off the top of my head. He made the point that when we talk about the priesthood of all believers, people aren't quite sure what that means, but he pointed out every human is a priest, if priest meaning a mediator between the created, the material and the spiritual world. And he made the point that the way we do this, the priestly act that we do, is by eating. And so I'm like, you had me at eating, you had me at hello.
That's right.
But what he's pointing out is we take the material aspects of the world, so food, whether it's an animal or a plant or whatever, we take that into our bodies, and then we, very biologically break that down into energy. But with that energy, we then can do spiritual things. So, that taco, that burrito, that broccoli, which is just material, once I eat it and then I go pray, or I go contemplate the truth, or I go in charity help someone else, I have now made that physical reality into a spiritual one. I have offered it up, and it is transformed. It is my priestly act, right, to take in the material world and utilize it for a spiritual purpose. You kind of hear this with people who will say the same thing, what is human work, but something like that. We take the world that is material and then we transform it into spiritual works, anything from, architecture to writing, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this goes down to what you're saying when it comes to alms. Alms giving is sort of a priestly act precisely because we take money or wealth or resources which are just dead material. I mean, they're not even a living thing like, an animal or a plant is. We take this dead material and we give it a use that is spiritual, that not only is now vivified and alive in this life, but as you've pointed out, has an eternal aspect. It now exists forever in heaven in the mind of God. And this is like, you talk about being literal, and maybe people who are young don't remember this, but I remember in college, like outside of nearly every event that I went to, there were like 16 tables of credit card companies hawking free stuff if you'd sign up for their credit cards. So I got a lot of free shirts and free debt by listening to these people. But what Gary Anderson's saying is, in a way, Jesus is like the 17th table. But he's like, all these other people have this APR, or they give you a free shirt, or you can get miles on, your flights with American Airlines or whatnot. He's like, but actually the terms and conditions of this investment exceed these not only in an infinite way, but in an eternal way, that they can't give back on the loan what your giving alms does every time you do it. And you're right. We don't think about that in terms economically literal enough, that it's literally the best deal to give to the poor and give ourselves to the Lord. That investment, that using your money, is better than any sort of loan or investment you could ever give.
Well, Bo, I try not to scare our listeners too much with too many confessions about my life, but this is one area where I feel challenged by Scripture quite often, because I know I joked earlier about like that Midwestern thriftiness or whatnot, but it can easily blend into like being miserly and kind of like, is there going to be enough to go around? But I feel like the way that we think about money so often in America, it is kind of with this idea of scarcity, right? Like, is there enough? And then it turns other people into competition. When you turn to the Gospels, I mean, for one thing, you have instances where our Lord takes, fish and bread and multiplies it miraculously. And then, of course, that is a foreshadowing of the Eucharist. And we pray in the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. And in the Eucharist, God's gifts are abundant. Like, we receive all that we need. I mean, it really is. It's something that we can take for granted or take lightly, but each day at the Mass, we see that God looks out for his children, and even in that one meal, one sacrifice, he provides us with what we need for that day.
So you were a good 1-2 punch, Bud, because you said you're tempted to miserliness. I'm completely the opposite way. I'm tempted to buy any shiny thing that immediately is shown to me. And this Ash Wednesday has a lesson for us, too. So you go like, hey, Bo, you could buy a third burrito, and you'll be hungry. 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later on a bad day, right? Like, it's not going to last. But this investment, giving to the poor, not only will it do good now, but it will do good in eternity. And it's like you said, so yours is like, okay, miserly. I want to know, like, okay, I'm going to save for myself, but the Lord gives all that I need. On the other hand, if you're more like me, there is no shiny thing that will make you as happy as storing up treasures in heaven. It might be hard for you to see that because the shiny thing is right there in front of you, but the shiny thing will one day rust and be shiny no more, and especially as they make cheap stuff these days, that might be more imminent than you realize. However, the shininess of heaven, whatever that might mean, but the happiness of heaven, there is no moth, there is no luster, there is no way in which that fades. And so I think, like you said, both temptations to miserliness or spending in a wasteful way. Ash Wednesday, not only through fasting, but through almsgiving, teaches us that there are treasures that are worth much more that we should consider.
You're listening to The Uncommon Good on Iowa Catholic Radio with Bo Bonner and Bud Marr. We're talking this morning about Ash Wednesday and falling this year on St. Valentine's Day. Bo, when we would talk about some of these topics in class, and I don't want to downplay, the genuineness or authenticity of students who would ask this question. And in fairness to our students, in college, that's one time where you feel precarious financially because, you're trying to get your education and make ends meet. But inevitably you talk about almsgiving and you have someone turn back and say like, well, I see the homeless man sitting by I-35 or whatnot, and I feel an impulse to give, but what if I give and he spends that on alcohol or drugs? And what do you have to say when people again, sort of a serious question about almsgiving?
Yeah, I mean, there's many things that come to mind. The joke I always gave in class is like, if you gave me $5, like I could use a beer right now too. Like, why are you mad at that guy wanting to have a beer? Now, to be serious, I know that they're saying like, well, what if someone's in addiction or things like that? All true. There are people who, if you knew personally what's going on, giving them money might be the worst thing in the world. My only point is to say, well, that's just not poor people, of course, too. There's plenty of people who are plenty wealthy, and the last thing they need is the wealth that they get because they, too, can go buy those things as well. So the condition that humans use the good things of this world badly are not reserved to one class of person, A. Yeah. B, if you're worried about that, the answer, it seems to me, is not don't give to that person. The answer might be, we'll get to know, like ask that person what they're actually going through and what they might need. Now, notice that that's really inconvenient. So to me, not all of us have enough time to go stop and find out, what's going on with everyone. So I think of the Lord who said, spend without expecting anything in return. And you're right. It's not the investment is not saying that every time that you give money to someone, they're going to use it well. That's unfortunately true for charities, right? Like charities that have done good through many years might get someone bad at the helm and turn away. We give support to our children or we give it to our friends. If we're only going to give charitably and profusely, as the Lord asks, to people we can be assured will use it to good purpose, I have more bummer news for you. We're never going to have that assurance. So the idea, I think, is if we give to the poor, knowing that we're giving to the hands of the Lord, I go back to your idea about trust. Do we trust that ultimately, even if maybe each particular instance of almsgiving, we're not dead sure how it will work? Do we give it knowing that the Lord has some good that he will do with it? Because the other thing, it can sound like a bummer, but will free us to almsgive. The point of giving alms is not to say if everyone just gave alms, there would be, we'd eradicate poverty or something like this. As Jesus said, the poor will be with us always. Almsgiving is not a social strategy to solve the difficulties of this life. Almsgiving, funny enough, says Gary Anderson, the person who should say thank you when almsgiving occurs is not the person who receives the money, but the person who gives it. You should say thank you to the beggar because the beggar is giving you a chance to actually save your soul. Gary Anderson gives a very interesting example of this in Sin, a History. At one point in Spain, the king said, hey, instead of actually giving alms, how about we just all basically, he was going to give a new tax, as it were, and he said, well, this tax we'll just take from everyone, and that's how we'll feed the beggars. And the people revolted, not because they were mad to pay more money. They were actually fine with that. They were mad because they thought the king was going to take away their chance to save their souls. Now, I know that we don't want to, we live in Protestant America, and so we're worried about, works righteousness. But Gary Anderson shows a good point to say they don't think that, it's like you have to give a certain amount of money and you get into heaven. They just so embodied that idea that to give to the hands of the poor is to give to Jesus Christ himself. Why would you take that away? So again, we've been giving alms ever since Christianity has existed, 2,000 years. It's not a social program. It's Jesus Christ, through his preferred loved ones, the poor, reaching out his hands to receive a gift from us, a gift that pays us back tenfold, 100-fold, infinity-fold, which is not a word.
Well, I liked the point that you made, Bo, about getting to know someone and getting to know their actual needs. Mercy College, one of our underwriters, one thing that they ask the students to do is to do, 20 hours of community service before they graduate. And
you're freaking out. You're actually freaking out the students. It's 15. I was about to leave that go, but I'm worried if a student's listening, they're like, oh, no.
Yeah. But what's partly great about that is, a lot of times they would work at St. Vincent de Paul or, a soup kitchen in a rough part of town or something, and they'd come back and they'd say, oh, Dr. Marr, I was expecting this grand experience, and, it was really life-changing, but and they'd tell me, maybe one of their horror stories, one student said, at St. Vincent de Paul, someone double-parked and blocked them in so they couldn't make it to class on time, or... Right. These two young people that I was helping out, they got into this massive fight, and it was really uncomfortable and awkward. For me, those things were, those are the stories that I like to hear because it disabused students of the idea that, giving was to make them feel better, right?
Right.
Giving moved from something that was sentimental to something that was human beings with real problems, and if I'm going to take seriously the gospel mandate, part of it requires, again, this kind of death to self where I enter into not just a financial exchange, but an actual relationship with people who need that.
And to wrap up the show, I think this really is one area where if we really consider the birth of St. Valentine's Day, this can help us realize that. The early romance tales, so the Middle Ages really did give us the courtly romance and some of these ideals that we have about, people making these sacrifices for their beloved. Those sacrifices were they were almost never mutual exchanges. They weren't to make the people feel well. They actually sound a lot like Lenten sacrifices. People would not eat for the sake of their loved ones, or they would go fight a crusade and take their ladies, girder or whatever, and just the memory was supposed to be enough alone, or just to see them on the balcony. I mean, it gets kind of cheesy, but you realize that the old romances, there was really this idea of the sacrifice and the sort of waiting that was most important. And really they do take this from the sacrificial language of the church, that, love is so important. Maybe they're, secularizing it, as it were, too much and making it about a lady instead of God, but love is so important that you would give your very self over to it. And if we can do that with human relationships, how much more necessary is that to do with a relationship with God?
Well, if I could throw one more word in, Bo, one thing that I've been challenged with recently is, it's funny in our culture where we draw the line about what's wasteful, I don't want to alienate any Vikings fans who listen to our show, but recently I took a trip to Minneapolis, and the football stadium that they built up there is insane. I think it costs $1 billion, but we felt like that spending of money was worth it for, on Sunday afternoons to have a certain experience. So I guess for me, to give money to, say, Iowa Catholic Radio, or to build a beautiful church, or certainly to give alms to the poor, if we're willing to build resplendent football stadiums that, those other sacrifices, that should involve cheerful giving, right?
I think that's a great way to end the show, Bud. I agree. This has been The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. And yes, folks, have a wonderful, wonderful Lent/St. Valentine's Day. folks, like Bud said, if you want to be a part of the ministry of Iowa Catholic Radio, it's not just a matter of trying to wiggle your way on here and, use your voice to blabber over the airwaves. This is a ministry that we're all a part of, and part of the way that you can be a part of that is to support us financially. We are a nonprofit. We run off of donations, and those donations allow for this ministry to work. We are the ability for people to hear about our Lord Jesus Christ 24/7 on the airwaves. Like people have pointed out before, radio airwaves can break through walls. So if you want to be a part of this ministry, please feel free to donate to Iowa Catholic Radio. Another way that you can be a part of this is to join our mini ministries. Bud, what's some of the things that people can do if they want to be a part of Iowa Catholic Radio throughout the week?
Well, if you want to grow deeper in your prayer life, we have the Rosary at 9:30 before the Uncommon Good. A great way to join in that Great Marian prayer. We're still reading through the Bible in a year, so if you want to join them, a couple months in, the Bible in a year can be heard at 5:30 every weekday.
And as we said before, we have all sorts of things that you can do being a part of our show. Like I said, if you want to text 515-223-1150 for all of our shows. If you want to go on Facebook, Iowa Catholic Radio. Our Twitter handle is at IA Catholic Radio as well. And like I said, we thank you. We appreciate all that you've done for us, and we love our listeners, so thank you for all that you do. This is the Uncommon Good for Bud Marr. I'm Bo Bonner. May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, in our families, in our city, our state, our nation, in the entire world. This is the Uncommon Good. God bless, and we will catch you next Wednesday. May your Lent be wonderful, the fast not too burdensome, and we'll hopefully all march together towards Easter with Jesus Christ. Thanks.
The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr is heard Wednesdays at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. on Iowa Catholic Radio and on the official Iowa Catholic Radio app.